We take one final look and talk about the players the LA Kings could select in the first round of this year's NHL Draft. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also one of the co-hosts of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that now is in his 19th season of putting out shows, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. The NHL Draft is one day away as we record this show. You're probably listening or watching this on draft day on Friday. Very exciting time of the year. Hopefully, it'll be another exciting night for the LA Kings by getting one of the future stars, hopefully, of their roster to be. I'm certainly excited to get to be out there to cover it live. This will be my third NHL Draft, and they're always pretty exciting. The LA Kings currently holding the 24th pick in the first round, and we are going to tell you what some draft experts are predicting of who is going to be the player that the Kings will select at number 24. If they keep the number 24 pick, which we'll talk more about a little bit later. But let's start with 8 well-known and respected draft analysts who cover the NHL Draft and see who they believe the LA Kings will pick and give you some details on who these players are. Now, you may or may not remember this, but last season we profiled 8 different draft experts, and those 8 experts all picked 8 different players. Only one of them was right, but that's not the case this year. There's actually a couple of players that more than one draft expert believe the LA Kings will select at number 24. Matter of fact, 3 of our 8 experts all think the Kings will take the same player. And that player is defenseman Blake Fidler. And we have talked about him a little bit before on this show. He's 6'4", 210 pounds, 18 years old, played the last 2 years in the Western Hockey League for the Edmonton Oil Kings. He is the son of Vern Fidler, who played 14 years in the NHL. So who are the 3 draft experts who all believe that Blake Fidler will be the selection by the LA Kings at number 24? Let's start with Craig Button of TSN, a former NHL general manager, now turned draft analyst. He said about the Kings taking Blake Fidler, quote, competitive, hard, territorial defender, takes away space and makes you earn every inch of the ice, plays with intensity and will take the initiative everywhere, not a player who sits back and hopes to win, end quote. He projects him as a second pairing defensive defenseman, and he said an NHL comparable is Josh Manson. Rachel Dory from ESPN thinks that Blake Fidler will be the selection of the Kings at number 24. She said about Fidler, quote, the Kings have almost nothing in their defensive prospect cupboard. Luckily for them, a 6'5" right-handed defenseman with NHL bloodlines is there for the taking in this scenario. Fidler is a mobile skater who eliminates play in transition. He's above average puck retrieval skills and projects as a reliable shutdown defenseman in the NHL. This is the right range for Fidler, and he fits perfectly with what the Kings need and will have time to develop into a big shutdown guy the Kings will rely upon for years to come, end quote. And Scott Wheeler of The Athletic also believes that Blake Fidler will go to the LA Kings at number 24. He said, quote, the sense I've gotten is that the Kings are likely to take a D here. I've also heard they want to get bigger. 2 things point to Fidler, end quote. So we'll keep an eye out and an ear out for Blake Fidler as possibly the pick for the LA Kings at number 24. We had 2 other draft experts also pick the same player other than Blake Fidler. And that was another son of an NHL player that we've also talked about in a previous show, and that is center Will Horkoff. He's 6'4", 190 pounds, played 1 season this past year at the University of Michigan. He's also the son of Sean Horkoff, who played 15 years in the NHL. Sam Constantino, he was the guy who did correctly pick a year ago that the Kings would select Liam Greentree. He says about Will Horkoff, quote, new GM Ken Holland will have known this player for a long time, and he'll be excited about adding size, grit, and the type of dedication Will's dad showed in over 1,000 career NHL games, end quote. And Corey Pronman of The Athletic also believes the LA Kings will pick Will Horcoff at number 24, saying about Horcoff, quote, his stock has been up noticeably this year after a great second half, and I expect him to go in the 20s come draft day. LA would ideally add a true center at this pick, but there aren't a ton of great options, so it defaults to the likely NHL winger who is huge and has high skill level, end quote. So again, Sam Constantino and Corey Pronman believe that Will Horcoff, the center out of Michigan and the son of another NHL player, will be the selection for the Kings at number 25. Number 24. So 5 of our experts all think it's going to be one player or another in Blake Fidler or Will Horcoff, but that means that there are a couple other experts who think it's going to be a different player. We'll start with Chris Peters of Flow Hockey. He thinks the Kings will take a center, but not Horcoff. He projects LA will select Jack Nesbitt, a center with the Windsor Spitfires. He's 6'4", 185 pounds. Peters said about the Kings selecting Nesbitt, quote, after drafting big Liam Greentree last year, the Kings are in a spot where they could land an even bigger teammate in Jack Nesbitt, who checks in at 6'4" and is still growing into his body. Nesbitt is a force at the net front and down low, but lacks excellent skating, which could give teams pause. He's been a little polarizing, but teams are seeing a 6'4" center with a bit of scoring pop, and that speaks to a lot of teams, possibly enough for Nesbitt to go even higher, end quote. So again, Chris Peters of Flow Hockey thinks the Kings will take center Jack Nesbitt at number 24. Jason Bacala of Sportsnet agrees the Kings should take a center, but not Horcoff, not Nesbitt. And he says a vastly different kind of center, and he suggests 5'10", 175-pound center Cullen Potter out of Arizona State. We talked about Potter in a previous show. You might remember he is the son of a former hockey player, but not an NHL player. Former U.S. national team star Jenny Potter is his mom, and Cullen Potter, widely considered the best skater in the entire draft. Bacala said about the Kings selecting Potter, quote, he's undersized but very explosive in open ice, leading to the rush. He's not tall, but he's very strong for his stature. In my opinion, he leans shooter more than distributor, but he sees the ice and is definitely a playmaker. Cullen averaged 20 minutes of ice time at the college level. Nearly all of his shifts came at even strength or on the power play. His transition pace pushes opponents back off their blue line and leads to clean zone entries and potential scoring chances. He had 13 goals in 35 games at Arizona State. NHL projection, middle six forward, will play at even strength and on the power play. So again, that was Jason Bacala of Sportsnet, and he thinks the Kings should go with quick, small center Cullen Potter. And that leaves us with one more draft expert to tell you about, and that would be TSN's Bob McKenzie. He also believes that the Kings will go with a defenseman, but not Blake Fidler. He suggests defenseman Cameron Reed. McKenzie didn't give any comments with his mock draft, but his colleague at TSN, Craig Button, said about Cameron Reed, quote, excellent skater with excellent sense for the game. He transitions well, closes on opponents well, and knows what play has to be made, then has the poise and patience to execute. He projects him as a second or third two-way elite skating defenseman, and he said a comparable at the NHL level for Cameron Reed is Jonas Brodin. So again, unlike last season where we had 8 different picks from 8 different draft experts, this time some of our experts actually are in consensus a little bit. 3 of them picked Blake Fidler, the defenseman. A couple of them picked the big center out of Michigan, Will Horcoff, and a couple other names sprinkled in between. So at least we've got some good names to keep an ear out for, keep an eye out for at number 24 for the LA Kings in the first round of the draft. But what if the Kings decide to trade out of the number 24 pick? If that's the case, we think we have you covered as well. We'll talk about that next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances using Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, so we talked on a previous show. LA Kings longtime director of amateur scouting, Mark Yannetti, was on the All the Kings Men podcast recently and said that he would like to move back in the draft. Again, right now they've got the 24th pick. He'd like to be later in the draft. Now, why would he want to do this? Well, he thinks he'll still be able to likely get the player or a player that the Kings want and pick up a second-round pick, which the Kings don't have this year. Now, Yannetti said in that same interview that he almost always is looking to move back in the draft just as a general rule of thumb. Now, he did this brilliantly last year when he moved from the number 21 pick to number 26 in a trade with Montreal and picked up a second-round pick. He was still able to get the player he wanted in Liam Greentree and then selected Carter George with that pick that he acquired. And Greentree and George are now seen as probably the two biggest prospects the Kings have. So again, this year the Kings are at number 24 as we go into the draft. But if Mark Yannetti has his way, they will move off of that pick. Now, who is the most likely trade partner for the LA Kings? Well, there's a couple of teams that make sense. The biggest team is the Philadelphia Flyers. They have 3 first-round picks 6, 22, and 31, and 3 second-round picks. So they would seem to be the perfect team that would be willing to lose one of those second-round picks to move up in the draft and potentially get a better player. Now, the Kings and Flyers have had business dealings with one another in the recent past. Andrei Kuzmenko came from Philadelphia to LA at the deadline. There was the Cal Peterson trade a couple of years ago. Now, those were not draft day deals, and those were also deals made under former GM Rob Blake. But again, the Flyers and Kings seem to have a pretty good relationship with each other. We'll see if they make a draft day trade. The San Jose Sharks also have 2 first-round picks, numbers 2 and 30, and 2 second-round picks. I think they're also in the mix that they might swap one of their second-round picks to move up from number 30 to number 24. So we'll see if Mark Yannetti gets his wish. If the Kings do trade back, and if it is the Flyers and the Sharks, then they would either have the number 30 or the number 31 pick. So who do our draft experts think are going to be around or think should be the picks at number 30 and number 31? Well, let's start it off with TSN's Craig Button. He says that the pick should be at number 30, defenseman Cameron Reed. This was also Bob McKenzie's pick at number 24 for the Kings, and we told you what Button had to say about Cameron Reed then. The number 31 pick, according to Craig Button, will be left winger Jack Murtaugh, 6 foot 200 pounds. He's heading to Boston University. I love the name, by the way. Jack Murtaugh sounds like an old Western sheriff or something. But here's the word on Jack Murtaugh. Quote, the first word that comes to mind when you mention Jack Murtaugh is workhorse. He plays an uncomplicated game and has no problem doing the dirty work on the forecheck or along the wall. Playing for the U.S. National Development Program, Murtaugh had 16 goals and 21 assists in 53 games. One of the main traits you notice about Murtaugh is his willingness to play in front of the net. The BU commit has a desirable combination of will and skill and is never afraid to get the puck to the net. And that is Jack Murtaugh, who may be the pick for the Kings at number 31. Rachel Dory of ESPN has a couple of names that we have talked about already, going at number 30 and number 31. At number 30, she thinks the pick is that small, speedy forward out of Arizona State, Cullen Potter. And at number 31, she says it's forward Bill Zonin. He is a 6'2", 190-pound forward from Noranda in the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League. We did talk about Zonin in an earlier show because a lot of the earlier drafts had him going at around number 24. Dory said about Zonin, quote, forward with two-way ability and a relentless playing style. Zonin has some of the best details in the draft, excellent forechecking, good defensive instincts, and willingness to get into dirty areas and win battles. He plays one of the more translatable games of the remaining players and never cheats for effort. If he can improve his skating through development and his stride mechanics, there's a real path for him being a fan favorite in the middle six, end quote. Now, is Rachel Dory on Bill Zonin. Scott Wheeler of The Athletic also had two names we've already talked about. He thinks at number 30, Bill Zonin, who we just talked about, would be the selection. And at number 31, he thinks that William Horkoff will be the selection. Remember, Sam Constantino and Corey Pronman both projected the Kings would take him at number 24. Now, keep that in mind when we talk about tiers coming up, and not the tears that run down your face, a different kind of tears. Speaking of Sam Constantino, he thinks the number 30 selection will be defenseman Sasha Boumedian. He's 6'1", 175 pounds. He's out of Sweden by way of Boston University. We talked about him on a previous episode as well. Constantino says about Boumedian, quote, substantial in-season growth, defensive reliability, and refined skating offer realistic upside as an effective second pair two-way defender at the NHL level who can produce secondary offense, end quote. Sam Constantino also at number 31 believes that the player that's available, a player we've talked about, the little fast skater, Cullen Potter. Corey Pronman of The Athletic also thinks at number 30, Bill Zonin is the pick. So that's the third of our draft experts who sees him available at the number 30 or 31 pick. And at number 31, Corey Pronman says the pick should be Milton Gastron. He's a 6 foot, 185 pound center out of Sweden. About Gastron, Pronman says, quote, hardworking two-way center who's been the leader of his Swedish age group for the past few years, has good skill and speed in his game as well. That is Milton Gastron, a center out of Sweden. Chris Peters of Flow Hockey suggests one name that we've talked about before and one name that we have not. The name that we have not is Henry Brustevich. He thinks he's going to go at number 30. He's a defenseman for the London Knights in the OHL, 6'1", 195 pounds. About Henry Brustevich, Chris Peters says, quote, he projects as a steady, mobile transition defender with the potential to grow into a number 4, number 5 NHL blue liner. Right-handed shot with a strong defensive foundation. He maintains good gap control, moves the puck very well, and supports play while remaining positionally sound. If he continues to develop his confidence and play-driving ability, Brustevich could evolve into a reliable second-pairing defender, and that is Henry Brustevich from the London Knights. Chris Peters thinks he's going to go number 30. At number 31, Chris Peters thinks Will Horkoff will be the selection. That's the fourth time one of our scouts have mentioned Will Horkoff either being at number 24, at number 30, or number 31, where we think the Kings are going to be in one of those positions. Bob McKenzie has two names we have yet to mention on this show or a previous show. At number 30, he thinks the pick is Eric Nielsen. He's a center out of Sweden, 5'11", 155. That is by far the lightest player I have seen listed. So he needs to put some weight on. Man, that is light. Nielsen projects as a defensively reliable bottom six checking center with penalty killing value. Wow, this little guy is a checking center. Okay. A fluid skater with a high motor and two-way instincts. He consistently supports play in all zones, eliminates space on the back check, and was one of the top defensive forwards in Sweden's junior 20 level. All right, Eric Nielsen. And at number 31, Bob McKenzie suggests the pick should be Riker Lee, another good name, right winger from the U.S. Hockey League. He's going to play at Michigan State next year. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. Riker Lee, Bob McKenzie says about him, or it was in a scouting report was said about him, one of the most skilled and creative forwards in the draft. Some scouts have him ranked in the late teens, but of their belief in his upside, because of their belief in his upside. Lee is a dynamic offensive player who consistently cuts through defensive coverage with elite puck handling and deceptive passes. His one-timer is one of the best in the draft class. His stride is stiff and lacks explosiveness. Lee will need major strides and mobility to maximize his offensive toolkit at the NHL level. That being said, if he adds a step or two to pair with his skill, Lee has the skill to become a creative middle six playmaker with top six upside, and that is Riker Lee, a right winger heading to Michigan State, and Bob McKenzie thinks he'll be the pick at number 31. And we have also Jason Bakawa of Sportsnet. He offers a couple of names we haven't mentioned before. At number 30, he thinks the pick is Cameron Schmidt, not to be confused with Cameron Reed, who we mentioned earlier. Cameron Schmidt is a right winger, 5'7", 160 pounds, playing for the Vancouver Giants in the Western Hockey League. Jason Bakawa says about Schmidt, quote, he attacks with speed off the rush and never wastes an opportunity to direct the puck on net. He's got a lethal release that can beat goalies from long range and the flank on the power play. Schmidt contributed 40 goals in 61 regular season games What I like most about the end of his season was the fact that he chipped in 4 goals, 5 assists in 5 playoff games. He projects him as a middle six forward who will play at even strength and on the power play, Cameron Schmidt. And our final player to mention, and Jason Bacala of Sportsnet says this player will be available at number 31. This is Alexander Zarovsky, right winger, 6'1", 160 pounds out of Russia. About him, quote, he has top 6 NHL upside in time. If he was playing in North America and producing offense, he would very likely have landed higher up on my list. There's always some risk drafting highly skilled Russian prospects like Zarovsky. He will no doubt be offered an enticing contract to remain in Russia. He produced 24 goals, 26 assists in 45 games in Russia's top junior league. NHL projection, potential top 6 forward, even strength, and power play. So those are the players that could be available at the 30th and 31st picks for the LA Kings if they, in fact, drop back in the draft and make a deal with either the Philadelphia Flyers or the San Jose Sharks, who a lot of people believe are the most likely teams looking to move up in the draft because of their multiple picks in the first and second round. Up next, we're going to talk about tiers, Tiers, and why they are important when the LA Kings are drafting. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've tried them, but if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is the next generation in prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If transitional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. It's completely online. Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL and use the code LockedOnNHL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet, Rugiet.com/LockedOnNHL and use the promo code LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing reviews. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, if you listen to the Mark Yannetti interview on the All the Kings Men podcast, and if you haven't, I would suggest that you do it, but Mark Yannetti talked a lot about tiers, Tiers. Now, what are tiers? A row or level of structure, typically one of a series of rows placed above the other. So, in other words, the LA Kings put players into tiers. And if the pick is around a certain tier, then they don't really care, generally speaking, whether that pick is at number 20 or number 30. If that player is in that tier, they feel like, say 10 players are interchangeable for the most part. Now, they may have those 10 players ranked 1 through 10, and they may have a preference, but generally speaking, those guys are kind of the same type of player that you're going to get. So let's try and explain this a little bit better. Tier 1 would be a player projected to be a top NHL player, an all-star caliber player. These are your top 3 picks usually in a typical draft. Sometimes it's maybe top 2, sometimes maybe it's top 5, but there's the top tier player. Tier 2 would be a player projected to be a borderline all-star player, but a very good player on your team. Tier 3 would be a guy, he's not going to be an all-star, but he's going to be very important for your team, probably a top 6 forward or a top 4 defenseman. Tier 4 is a player that could be in the top 6, but more likely a middle-of-the-line player. Tier 5 is a middle lineup player, a third-line player, or a third-pairing defenseman. Tier 6 is a player who should be able to make your roster in some capacity. And then Tier 7 will be a player who has a chance to play in the NHL, but is a borderline NHL player. Now, Corey Pronman is the guy who did rank his players for his mock draft in these tiers. And he didn't have anyone outside the top 125 players listed in his tiers. So basically, anyone outside the fourth round is not expected to make it to the NHL level. Now, do fourth round players occasionally make it? Sure. We've seen seventh round players make it. Luc Robitaille was like a ninth round player, which we don't even have anymore. But generally speaking, according to the stats and the analytics, these tiers, are usually pretty spot on. Now, the LA Kings and Mark Yannetti has talked about the Kings use these tiers. So, for example, the Kings have the pick at number 24. That would probably project, and according to Corey Pronman's mock draft, the player at number 24 would be a tier 5 player. In other words, projected to be a middle of the lineup type of a player, an NHL player, but probably going to be on your third line, maybe second or third pairing defense, something like that. Now, Corey Pronman had 17 players projected in his tier 5. Most of those names are players we've talked about in this episode or previous episodes. Cameron Reed, Sasha Boumediene, Blake Fiddler, Malcolm Spence, Milton Gastrin, William Horkoff, Cullen Potter. Now, Mark Yannetti and his staff could have, instead of 17 players in their tier 5, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 19, but it's something in the ballpark, most likely. And the list of Kings players in that tier 5, maybe it deviates a little bit from a guy like Corey Pronman's list, but most likely, most of those players there's going to be a lot of those players in that same tier. And the Kings feel like if they can get a player in that tier 5, in that group, say from 20 to 36, which is what Corey Pronman has as his tier 5, then they're going to be pretty much okay with that pick. And so that's why Mark Yannetti is looking to move back in the draft. The Kings have the 24th pick. And if they keep that pick, they're in tier 5. But if they move back to pick 30, they're still in tier 5. The group of players they have in tier 5, kind of interchangeable. So they don't really care if they get that player at number 24 or number 30. And sometimes, as was the case apparently last year with Liam Greentree, the Kings still got the same player they were going to pick at number 21, at number 24, or number 26, was it? Regardless, they've gone through all of the calculations, all the analytics guys get together, and Mark Yannetti had said in the interview on the All the Kingsmen podcast, they're pretty good at predicting accurately, within a couple of players usually, exactly who's going to take who in the draft. They know what other teams' draft tendencies are. They know what other teams are looking for, most likely, the type of players they're looking for. They've got all this information. And so they're pretty good about knowing exactly who's going to pick who and where. So they have a really good idea if there's a player they want, like Liam Greentree, and if all their projections say he's still going to be available at number 24, number 26, whatever it is, we've got the 21st pick. Let's try and move back, and we still think we can get him. And if we don't get him, we're still going to get a player in that tier, and we'll be okay with that. So that's what the Kings look to do. That's why they're looking to move back. And that's why they know pretty well that, maybe they don't get that exact player, but they're still going to get a player in that tier. So that's why the Kings are looking to move back. And of course, they add a second round pick. And we saw how amazingly that worked out last year. Liam Greentree, they move back, they still get the guy they want, and they get Carter George with the second pick. So that's what the Kings are hoping to do this year. It may not work out as spectacularly as it did a year ago, but hopefully that explanation helps you to understand why, if you didn't know already, maybe you already did, why the Kings are looking to move back and why they still feel like, with all their research, that there's a likelihood that they can still get a certain player, maybe the exact player, but maybe just a player in that tier with a pick later on in the draft. So maybe they're unable. They have to have a trade partner, obviously, to be able to trade back. Maybe teams aren't looking to move up. If that's the case, then the Kings will pick at number 24, and we'll see if it is one of the players that we projected and what experts have projected the Kings will take at number 24. But the NHL draft is fascinating to me. There's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of work. These guys work year round for this one day or 2 days on Friday and Saturday with rounds 1 and then 2 through 7. So Very interested to see how the Kings do. Mark Yannetti has been doing this for a long time. He's one of the most respected guys in the NHL at doing this. And so really interesting to get into what the Kings do with the draft. Do they trade back or do they have to stay at number 24? Who are they going to take? And getting all into the Kings draft for 2025. Really excited about it and looking forward to talking about it, seeing what goes down for the Kings. We are going to have some extra content from the NHL draft. If you are interested in that, send me an email at lakingsextra@gmail.com, lakingsextra@gmail.com. We're going to have some pretty cool extra stuff as I will be live at the NHL draft here in LA and giving you some behind the scenes looks at things as well. For you everydayers, those who listen and watch Locked On the Kings every day, we got a couple of interesting shows coming up. Our next show, Friday night after the first round of the draft, we will recap the Kings' first round and also start the first part of our fan feedback show, which is usually on our Friday. And then over the weekend, we'll have the recap of the Kings' day 2 of the NHL draft and then wrap up part 2 of our fan feedback show as well. And so anyway, should be a couple of great shows coming up. Looking forward to it and hope you will join us for that. If you want to get an email in for the feedback show, you still can. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com is always the email address for that. Leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. We'd love for you to stay interact with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. Maybe even a Facebook page, I hear. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.